Welcome, everybody. These are the reconciliation pop-ups for the recreation and park sector with Janet and with Jess. I'm Janet.
I'm Jess.
Welcome to our series of 4 pop-ups, brought to you today by Alberta Recreation and Parks and Trellis. All right, are you ready, Jess?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So as we have been taught by our elders, we always start in a good way with a smudge. So I'm going to turn this over to Jess to explain to us why we smudge and the significance of it. And we both have a smudge that we're going to start. So let's do that right now.
We'll start smudge first, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Where's my lighter? Won't light. And for those of you who are joining us and you start your day in a good way and in smudge, just go ahead and either prepare your own smudge, or you can just reach out and smudge yourself with ours. So a smudge for us is a way that we start in a good way. We use the smudge to create safe spaces, to create safety in what we're about to embark on. So whether that's smudging to start our day, to smudge to start an important meeting, to smudge to talk about difficult things so that we can ensure that the way that we speak is understood and honored. And it's also a cleansing and it's a purification for us. So when I light smudge, I'm not just lighting it and preparing it mindlessly. There's intention behind how I do that. And it's so that I can today support you and your learning wherever you might be. And so that's a little bit about smudge. I'm not going to go into medicines. I'm not going to talk about the details of smudge. That's for a separate thing and something that I think needs to be done in person, but it's also really important for both myself and for Janet and for the elders and the Indigenous community that we serve, that we start these coming sessions in a smudge. This is going to be the only smudge because in our world, we are doing this all today. And so this smudge is going to carry us through that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Jess. And also, you might wonder why we didn't officially introduce ourselves. The importance of the smudge is that it actually starts off all the things we do in a good way. And we just wanted to enforce that learning with you through our own actions. So thank you for that explanation, Jess. So who are we? And you will see a lot of these kind of things, these introductory slides, and a lot of the presentations that you see now in this very virtual world. But for us, it's a bit more than that, because a lot of the work that we do together, Jess and I, and then as we work as allies and with and in Indigenous communities, relationships are key. And you will often have people ask you who you are. And it's more than just a superficial name explanation. It's almost like a gauge of who you are as a person, who's your genuine face, because basically we're deciding whether or not, or people are deciding whether or not they want to even start a relationship with you. And that's a working relationship, a friendly relationship, whatever that might be. So I will, as my guest, Jess, I will ask you to introduce yourself first. And who are you? What's going on in your world?
Well, my mom gave me the name Jessica Smith, but my spiritual name is Singing Buffalo Woman. That was gifted to me by Daryl and Linda Brass, who are very near and dear to my heart. My professional self is a program manager within Trellis, and my personal self is a little bit more complex than that. I was born and raised in Halifax. My father is from Hiawatha First Nation near Peterborough, Ontario, and my mom is from Port Albany in New Brunswick. And I moved to Alberta when I was 13 and really began to explore who I am, walking in as an individual who walks in two worlds and comes from two very different worlds. And that's a little bit about who I am. I support my agency, Trellis, which previously was the Boys and Girls Clubs of Calgary, and Aspen Family and Community Services. And so if you've heard, they've recently amalgamated. And so now we are Trellis. But I currently support the Indigenous work within the agency, as well as multiple housing programs within the agency as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for that. And the name that my mom gave me was Janet. So I'm Janet Naclia, Programs and Manager with Alberta Recreation and Parks Association. The spirit name was also given to me by Linda and Daryl Brass. So Skiki Kihu Esquale, which means Medicine Eagle Woman. I do work with a lot of Blackfoot elders as well, and they have given me the Blackfoot version, Natui Pita Aki. That's the Blackfoot version of Medicine Eagle Woman. And then very recently, I was very honored to be given another Blackfoot name by an elder down in Guinai named John Chief Moon Sr., a very well-respected, amazing man and elder in the Blackfoot Confederacy, and that is South Eagle Woman, Upska Pitaki. So often I'll work with Blackfoot elders who will call me by both or either names. So it's always a great honor to acknowledge that as well. It's interesting to talk about like who you are and why you do this work. So I also have other kind of labels that are associated with me. So non-Indigenous, settler, colonizer is something that as a nation, those are names that are very important to how we understand ourselves within this work particularly. But I'm also very proud to say ally and moving strongly into accomplice work. So the idea, there has been discussions a lot lately as to what does it mean to be an ally? Do you stand by and watch and help, or are you accomplice? Are you deep in the action, taking responsibility with what's happening along with your partners and your friends in that deep, genuine way? So that's something also that I own and that I acknowledge. And I'm originally from Northern Alberta, born and raised in Fort McMurray. I'm one of those who now lives here in Calgary in Mohkinstsis. And we could talk about that next. You ready? Next slide, Jess?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So look, we're ahead of ourselves. Jess and I are so amazing that we're actually going forward in time or backwards in time. I'm not sure how that works actually. So we've talked about smudge. We've talked about who we are. We talk about why does it matter? Because people need to know who you are if you actually want to create those deep friendships. Like I like to call it a deep friendship, opposed to say a collaboration. And so let's move on to a key third point we'll discuss today. Many people come to me and ask about this. I think Jess also learns as well, because as Jess does work for Trellis, I also do a lot of work about collaborations with Indigenous communities for ARPA. And so this comes into my wheelhouse a lot. Why do we do land acknowledgements? So what you'll see here, and I'll read it out for those who might have vision challenges, is ARPA's official land acknowledgement. So the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association would like to acknowledge the First Nations, the Métis, and all the people across Alberta who share a deep and share a history and a deep connection with this land. We dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And so, you know, it's interesting for us because as a provincial organization, we did want to span Alberta and what that looks like. But really, one thing that thought on this that I want to share is that just recently we had a teaching from our elder, Rose Crowshoe. It was actually at a Trellis event that happened in regards to Orange Shirt Day. And she was saying that these land acknowledgements are more than just words. It's not saying a mumbo jumbo. It's not just reading off a page. What the actual, the point of them is that it's about respect, respecting the people who are here, the land, respecting the land that you're on, the spirit of the nations, and to offer yourself in humility, in humbleness to those who came before you. And so I think a lot of people read these acknowledgements without really fully understanding what they are, knowing that it is a proper protocol. So yay for doing that. But the next step from what the elders are saying is to really connect and understand why we're saying these words. So I'm going to throw that over to you, Jess, to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important when we talk about the land acknowledgement to really pay attention to what our connection to the land is and our responsibility to the land. Many of our elders and our community will talk about the stewardship that Creator gave us the responsibility over. And so that responsibility to the land is key. It's a little bit more than that though today. When we think about our shared history and the things that have occurred, when we talk about the signing of treaties, when we talk about residential schools, 60 Scoop, and all of that history that has come to bring us all to where we are today, we have to honor the traditional territories that we all reside on. And so that is a key component when we look to truth-telling that eventually leads to that reconciliation. It's a respect to our ancestors. So when we speak our land acknowledgements, it's so much deeper than just reading that document and what's official to your agency, right? It's explaining it, it's understanding it, it's knowing the purpose behind it. And again, what is your connection? What's your connection to the people of the land and the relationships that you have? So Janet and I are in Treaty 7 territory. And so Treaty 7 is obviously one of 11 numbered treaties. Am I correct? Wouldn't that be awful if I was wrong? And then so we have lots of unceded territory. We have lots of just totally undocumented, I guess, in a Western sense, territories in North America. But Treaty 7 is where we reside. And this agreement was signed between the Queen and the tribes of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Tsuut'ina and the Iiyika'kimaat, or as many folks know, the Stoney Nakoda, September 22nd, 1877. So quite some time ago, but it's important to understand even what a treaty is. So my first task to you is to learn about treaties and what they are and how they affect all of us, because technically we are all treaty people. So it was signed at Blackfoot Crossing in the Bow River, so present day Siksika Nation. So it's really important that we acknowledge that because with those treaties came a lot of damage and maybe not so much honoring that we look at today when we talk about those things, and we wonder why we have the struggles that we do within our communities. Yeah. So Blackfoot Confederacy, or Nisitapi, meaning the people. And one thing that's really interesting about a lot of Indigenous languages across North America is that oftentimes the title of a nation is similar to what you would say is the people or people in the English language. So it's a roughly translated usually. It's always not always the case, but a lot of the times. So Nisitapi means the people, and it's a collective names for three nations: the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. So as you can see here, Siksika is the Blackfoot, the Kainai is many chiefs, and the Piikani is the poor robes, and they were all residing in southern area of just outside of Calgary area, as well as we have Blackfoot people down in the United States as well. And so it's interesting to see how land was divided and how that split nations and communities up, because the Blackfoot Confederacy was actually quite a large, and still is, but was quite a bit bigger than what we understand it to be today. So then we have the Tsuut'ina, And so these individuals migrated south into the Great Plains during the 1700s. And it's likely that more than just migration, it was moving for safety. So they have Sarsi language, but remain pure Athabascan to this day, but closely related to the Dene, and as well as the Navajo and the Apache down in the Americas. What else I think is important to note is that, well, I lost myself now. It's okay, go ahead. You can pop on to the next slide. Yeah, so the Iiyika'kimaat. So I think it's really important to honor their traditional name, the Iiyika'kimaat, instead of referring to them as Stoney Nakoda. So an elder explained to me that Stoney was a name given to them by European settlers, and so that's often the case when you listen to Indigenous stories and nations and how they were renamed. Even our last names and things like that were shifted to accommodate European settler documentation and understanding from their worldview instead of ours. So the Iiyika'kimaat are related to the Dakota and Lakota nations. Nakota meaning friend and ally, and the Stoney, like I said, was given to by the settlers. So they're also very closely related to the Assiniboine. And Alberta's Nakota First Nation comprises of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley First Nations. So when Janet was reading her land acknowledgement, Alberta Recreation and Parks Reach is really that across Alberta, and so they're encompassing all nations. For instance, when you're down here on this territory, because I am a visitor in this land, I'm not from here, you're going to hear a lot more detail about the people of that land. And I also challenge you to explore the territory that you're on and develop your land acknowledgement to respect and honor the people in that territory. And there's lots of ways to do that, so don't hesitate. We'll talk about that a little later in one of our series about how to actually develop your own, some of the websites and stuff when you're on your own learning journey. So we also have the Métis, and here in this area is Region 3. There's 6 regions in Alberta, and so it's really important to recognize our Métis family because they were displaced even more so throughout colonization, and so there is this understanding that Métis people have that opportunity to be a part of policy and decision-making processes because they were often left out. And there's also this need for the pursuit of self-reliance, self-determination, self-management. And so that governance that we're seeing now is divided into these 6 regions. And so that's a little bit about the Métis. And this is just a bit of a map that outlines Alberta and how it was divided up by regions for Métis people. So a few little statistics here about Indigenous people in North America. Please go ahead and pause if you'd like to read them all. This is all just Government of Canada statistics. So as you know, or maybe you don't know, but Indigenous people currently make up roughly 4% of the Canadian population. And so in 2006, 44% of the Aboriginal population were post-secondary graduates in 2000, like I said, in 2006, and then it increased in 2007 up to 48%. And so those are some little wins that I want to talk about too, because when we start talking about a little bit of the heavier components that this presentation will make up, we also need to acknowledge that there are beautiful things happening in our communities as well. So go ahead and pause if you'd like to read through these a little bit more.
Awesome. So thank you for that, Jess. And we're at the end. Can you believe it? at the end of pop-up 1, soon to move on to pop-up number 2. So the whole idea of this series, it is a 4-part series, and the idea is you'll break it up so it's actually small bits of learning that you could take away with you, share with whoever you want, your friends, your colleagues. Here's our information in case you want to talk to us or contact us. And it's a 4-part series. As Jess will say, we will build on this learning, and you'll be able to come and go from it as you see fit. So thank you so much for joining us on this first learning, and we will see you in pop-up number 2.